The first alert tone was routine. It was a familiar melodic chime in the grand chaotic symphony that constituted my life's work. But the address that ignited on my screen, a pulsing blood-red box demanding absolute and immediate attention, turned my blood to ice. It was my next-door neighbor's house. My house. Then, the audio patch came through. I heard the voice. A woman's voice stretched high and thin, with a meticulously manufactured panic, screaming directly into the 911 operator's ear. He's possessed. The boy is possessed. His eyes were black. I tell you, completely black. He was speaking in tongues, some demonic language I've never heard. My hand froze over my mouse. The entire world, with all its ambient noise and peripheral movement, narrowed to 3 points of reality: the voice, the address, and the dawning, sickening horror of comprehension. The possessed boy she was screeching about was my son. My sweet, gentle, autistic son, Sam. He's violent. The voice shrieked a blade of pure hysteria. He was trying to break through the fence. He's trying to get into my yard. You have to send someone right now, before he hurts someone. He has the devil in him. The call taker, a junior dispatcher I'd trained myself, was already following protocol. Her fingers were a blur on the keyboard, keying in the codes for a violent, mentally unstable subject. A potential hostage situation. A high-risk encounter. I saw the dispatch recommendation flash onto my supervisory console: multiple unit stage for approach, notify SWAT. A full-scale tactical response. For my son. For my Sam, who was almost certainly in our backyard at this very moment, his small hands tending to his beloved heirloom tomato plants, humming his favorite low single-note tune. My title is Crisis Dispatch Supervisor. I am supposed to be the calm at the storm's epicenter. I am the voice that overrides panic, the mind that sees the whole chessboard, the gatekeeper who directs the entire city's emergency response apparatus. But in that moment, stripped of title and training, I was just a mother. I was a mother, listening to a lunatic weaponize my son's disability, aiming the full terrifying and irreversible force of a SWAT team directly at my own back door. The system was a runaway train, gathering lethal momentum with every passing microsecond. I had seconds to throw myself on the tracks. I slammed the override key. My fingers, usually so steady, flew across the console with a desperate, practiced speed. My voice cut through the primary comms channel, layered with an authority that belied the primal terror strangling my heart. Dispatch, this is Supervisor Thorne. Belay that SWAT notification. I am taking direct control of this incident. All units stand by. The frantic crackling energy in the dispatch center ceased, as if a switch had been thrown. It was replaced by a stunned, questioning silence. Every head turned. Every pair of eyes was on me. They had no idea I was staring at a live data feed of my own life, about to be systematically torn apart by a vicious, calculated lie. Our mornings were a sanctuary. They were a carefully choreographed ballet of quiet routine and unspoken love, a fortress against the world's harsh noise. Sam, at 10 years old, communicated far more with his actions than he ever did with his words. His world was one of deep, singular, and intense focus. His grand passion, his entire universe, was our small backyard garden. He would spend hours there, his hands buried in the rich soil, his face a perfect mask of pure, unadulterated concentration, as he examined the intricate fractal patterns on a cabbage leaf, or listened head-tilted to the specific frequency of a bumblebee's buzz. When he was happy or deeply focused, he would stim. He would rock a gentle, rhythmic motion from the waist, a human metronome keeping time with an internal piece. And he would hum a low, single-note resonant tune that vibrated deep in his chest. It was his way of processing the world. It was his method of filtering out the overwhelming sensory input that assaulted him from every direction. It was the sound of his contentment. To my husband Ben and me, it was the most beautiful music in the world. To our new neighbor Carol, it was apparently the sound of the abyss. My job required me to leave this sanctuary every single day and step willingly into the city's swirling chaos. I managed the ceaseless flow of human crisis, from 5-car pileups on the freeway, to violent domestic disputes, to multi-alarm structure fires that painted the night sky orange. I was good at it. I could detach, analyze, direct, and deploy, ensuring the right help got to the right place in the right way. My home was the one place that chaos was never, ever supposed to reach. The true inciting incident, the first tremor before the earthquake, had happened 2 weeks before. It was a placid Sunday afternoon. I was weeding the petunias. Sam was in his garden patch, rocking and humming gently, watering his burgeoning zucchini plants. Carol appeared at the fence separating our yards. Her face was a tight, strained mask of what she probably believed was compassionate concern. "Anna," she said, her voice soft, but laced with an unsettling core of steel. "I need to talk to you about your son." "Sam?" I asked, standing up slowly. A cold, hard knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. "That noise he makes," she said, gesturing toward him with a flick of her chin. "And the rocking. It's deeply unsettling to watch. It's not natural." She paused, then added a phrase that hung in the air like poison. "I've seen this kind of thing before. It's a classic sign of spiritual turmoil." I was so taken aback I could only stare at her, my mind fumbling for a response. "Carol, Sam is autistic." I finally managed, forcing my voice to remain even. "The humming and rocking are how he self-regulates. It's called stimming. It's a good thing. It means he's calm and happy." She shook her head, a pitying little smile playing on her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "That's what the secular world tells you, of course. But there are darker, unseen influences at play. I'm part of a fellowship, a special group that deals with these precise kinds of spiritual afflictions. We can help him. We can help your boy." As she said "your boy," her gaze drifted from me to Sam, but her expression shifted. It became distant, haunted her eyes, unfocusing for a split second, as if she were looking straight through my son and seeing someone else entirely. It was a fleeting, chilling micro-expression that I registered but couldn't place. She tried to pass a pamphlet through a gap in the fence slats. I saw the title printed in a severe Gothic font, "Spiritual Deliverance and Soul Cleansing." I held up my hand, a flat, unmoving wall, refusing to take it. "Thank you, Carol, but no," I said, my voice dangerously calm now. "My son is not afflicted. He is not in turmoil. And he absolutely does not need to be cleansed. He is perfect, just the way he is. Please do not bring this up again." I had thought, with a naivety I would later curse, that my firm, unequivocal rejection would be the end of it. I had catastrophically misjudged the nature of her fanaticism. It wasn't a casual belief. It was a crusade. Her first escalation was a campaign of insidious psychological warfare. She organized a small, grim-faced group from her fellowship, and they began to hold prayer vigils on the public sidewalk, directly in front of our house. They would stand in a small, self-righteous circle, heads bowed, praying loudly and performatively for the troubled soul inside. They begged for deliverance from the darkness that has taken root in this home. It was a grotesque public spectacle of piety, meticulously designed to shame, isolate, and intimidate us. Ben was incandescent with fury, ready to march out and confront them. I had to physically hold him back, cautioning him against it. A direct confrontation was exactly what she wanted. It would legitimize her claims in her own mind. It would be proof of our spiritual agitation. The second escalation was a direct attack on Sam's sanctuary. Carol filed a formal multi-page complaint with the Oak Haven Homeowners Association. Her complaint was a work of twisted bureaucratic genius. She never mentioned autism. She didn't complain about noise. Instead, she cited an obscure, archaic bylaw about maintaining the moral and wholesome character of the community. She claimed in florid and alarming prose that Sam's erratic and disturbing public behaviors were creating a spiritually unwholesome and fearful environment for the neighborhood's children. Her proposed solution was that the HOA demand we contain the source of the disturbance by keeping Sam indoors at all times. She was trying to use a neighborhood committee to put my son under house arrest, to take away the one place on earth he felt truly safe, truly free, truly himself. The HOA, bewildered by the bizarre quasi-religious nature of the complaint, but clearly intimidated by Carol's fervor and the unified front of her fellowship, agreed to schedule a formal hearing. And now this, the 911 call. This was the final nuclear option. When her attempts at psychological and bureaucratic warfare had failed to produce the result she craved, she had decided to summon a tactical police unit. She had fabricated a story of demonic possession and imminent violence, transforming my gentle gardening son into a monstrous threat, all to get the authorities to do what she could not. She wasn't just trying to get him kept indoors anymore. She was trying to have him forcibly removed. Back in the dispatch center, my mind was a whirlwind of controlled panic. I routed the screaming 911 call to my own console, silencing the panicked alerts that were still echoing through the room. All units stand down. I commanded again, my voice a sheet of ice over the terror in my gut. Hold your current positions. Single Unit Officer Miller. I want you to proceed to the location, non-emergent. Code 2. No lights, no siren. I have credible reason to believe this is a malicious false report. A swatting incident. I had to frame it officially carefully. I want you to be my eyes and ears. The reporting party is the neighbor at 1412 Oak Lane. The subject of the call is a 10-year-old autistic boy. He is nonverbal and gentle. Approach with extreme caution, but be advised the primary potential threat here is the reporting party, not the child. I patched directly into Officer Miller's earpiece, a private channel. Miller, it's Thorne. My voice cracked for the first time. That's my house. That's my son. Get there now. I could hear his sharp, sudden intake of breath over the comm. Copy that, Supervisor. On my way. ETA 2 minutes. While Miller was en route, I pulled the full, unedited recording of Carol's call. I listened to it again this time, forcing myself to detach to listen not as a mother, but as an investigator, a prosecutor. Her words were chillingly precise in their calculated lies. Black eyes, demonic voice, trying to break down the fence. Each one was a specific fictional detail, carefully chosen to trigger the most extreme law enforcement response possible. It was a textbook case of swatting the malicious act, of reporting a fake, life-threatening emergency, to get armed police to descend on an innocent person's home. It was a serious felony. This crystal-clear digital recording was Exhibit A in the case I was already building against her in my head. I called Ben. Stay inside. Lock all the doors. An officer is coming to the house, a friend. Do not engage with Carol. Whatever you do, do not speak to her. Just stay with Sam. I'm handling it. But even as I worked the system marshaling my resources, a sickening, persistent question lingered. Why this? Why the theatrical, demonic language? The possession narrative felt too specific, too practiced. Why the extreme, life-threatening escalation over a neighborhood dispute? It felt deeply personal. It felt obsessive. I trusted my gut. It had saved lives more times than I could count. I called Marcus, a trusted colleague in the data analysis unit, a wizard who could pull needles from digital haystacks. Marcus, I need you to run a deep background check for me. Official investigation into abuse of emergency services. Name is Carol Jennings. I need everything you can find. Name changes, previous addresses, court records. Expedite it. An hour later, Marcus called back. Anna, I've got the basics. Name change is confirmed. Used to be Carol Gable. Moved here from out of state about 18 months ago. But something's weird. A lot of her past records are sealed. Juvenile court records, looks like. I'm trying to get a judge to unseal them, but it'll take time. The system is pushing back. Sealed records. A name change. This was more than a grudge. Then, Miller called in his report from the scene. His voice was low and tense. "Supervisor, I'm on scene. It's exactly as you said. The boy is in the backyard with his father watering plants. Scene is completely calm and quiet. Code 4. He paused. "I spoke with the RP Carol. She's unhinged, sticking to her story, wild-eyed. But here's the strange thing. As I was leaving, I glanced in her back window. The curtains were drawn, but there was a gap. In her living room, it looked like a shrine. Candles, pictures. One picture in the center of a young boy. It felt off. A shrine. A hidden past. My professional instincts screamed that the answer wasn't in a database that a judge could seal. It was in that house. The danger of what I was contemplating was immense. It was illegal. It was career suicide. But the danger my son had just been in was greater. I had to know what I was truly up against. That evening, I saw my chance. Carol and her fellowship gathered on the sidewalk for their nightly vigil, their voices a low, pious drone in the twilight. It was a performance I now understood as a bizarre alibi. Ben was putting a sleeping Sam to bed. The world seemed to hold its breath. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I slipped out my back door, cloaked in the deep shadows along the property line. The fence between our yards had a loose slat, one I'd been meaning to fix. Tonight, it was an entryway. I slid through, my hands trembling. The back door to Carol's house was, as I'd suspected from Miller's report of her agitation, unlocked. She had likely run out in a panic to make her 911 call. Her house was cold, unnaturally tidy, and smelled of lemon polish and something else. Something stagnant, like old grief. The living room was just as Miller had described. A small table was covered in a black cloth adorned with unlit candles and several framed photos of a boy with sandy hair and a shy smile. It was a memorial. But it was the locked door down a short hallway that drew me in. It was a simple bedroom door, but a heavy-duty deadbolt had been installed on the outside. My blood ran cold. I found a bobby pin in my hair, my fingers clumsy as I worked the primitive lock on the doorknob. It clicked open. The room was a prison. The window was boarded up from the inside. There were scratches on the walls, deep gouges in the wood of the doorframe. And on a small, dusty nightstand lay a leather-bound scrapbook. My hands shook as I opened it. The first few pages were normal. Photos of the boy from the Shrine Daniel. Birthday parties, school pictures, a trip to the beach. He looked happy, vibrant. Then the tone shifted. The photos became more strained. Daniel looked thin, anxious, his eyes shadowed. Newspaper clippings were pasted in. Family fights, CPS over medical care. Parents allege spiritual attack. Refused diagnosis. Tourette's syndrome, one article said. A neurological disorder. Carol and her husband had rejected it. They saw a demon. The final pages were the key, the dark, tragic secret that explained the entire unholy crusade. They weren't photographs. They were hand-drawn sketches, done in charcoal with a frantic, terrifying energy. One drawing depicted Daniel tied to a chair, his parents and other figures standing over him, their hands outstretched. Another showed him being held down in a bathtub, the water churning around him. The caption, written in Carol's spidery handwriting, read, "The cleansing of the vessel." The demon fights the holy water. He had almost drowned. She had almost killed her own son in a botched, homemade exorcism. That was the shocking truth. This wasn't just about religious belief or medical neglect. It was about active, dangerous physical abuse, born from delusion. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying as I photographed every single page. The scrapbook, the locked room, the scratches on the door. She hadn't just lost her son to the system. He had been rescued from her. She was a ghost, haunted by the child she had tormented. And in Sam, she saw a chance to reenact the entire tragedy, to finally get the outcome she believed she deserved. She wasn't just a malicious neighbor. She was a predator, reliving her own trauma, and trying to pull my son under with her. And the danger she posed was infinitely greater than I had ever imagined. The emergency HOA meeting was held in the sterile, fluorescent-lit community clubhouse. The air was thick with tension, suspicion, and the sour tang of recrimination. The board had called the meeting to address Carol's formal complaint, but news of the massive police presence at my house had already spread like wildfire, mutating and growing more monstrous with each telling. Carol was there, flanked by two stern-faced women from her fellowship, and a sharp-suited man I instantly recognized as a lawyer. She looked pale, but resolute, a martyr, ready for her moment. She clearly believed the police incident would be the capstone of her argument, the ultimate proof of the danger she had been warning them about. She had no idea that I was the supervisor who had taken the call. She had no idea that I held the keys to her entire history in a digital file on my laptop. The HOA president, a nervous man named Henderson, called the meeting to order with a trembling gavel. Carol was the first to speak. She gave a tearful, impassioned performance, her voice trembling with manufactured conviction. She spoke of her constant fear for the neighborhood's children, of the dark energy emanating from our home, of the violent demonic episode that had finally forced her to call 911 in terror for her life. "I did what any good God-fearing neighbor would do," she concluded, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "I called for help when I saw a soul in torment and a body in a violent rage. I pray that you will all see the clear and present danger before it's too late, and take action to protect the wholesome, godly character of our community." She sat down. Her lawyer gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Her allies murmured support. The rest of the room looked confused, uncertain, and deeply uncomfortable. Then it was my turn. I walked to the podium at the front of the room, my movements deliberate and calm. I opened my laptop and plugged it into the room's projector and speaker system. I faced my neighbors. "My name is Anna Thorne." I began, my voice clear and carrying to every corner of the room. "Carol is right about one thing. She did call for help. I'd like for you all to hear exactly how she asked for it." Before her lawyer could jump up and object, I pressed play. Carol's voice, raw, frantic, and filled with shrieking lies, flooded the silent clubhouse. "He's possessed. His eyes were black. He's violent. He was trying to break through the fence. He's speaking in a demonic language." The effect was stunning. The room fell utterly, completely silent. The stark contrast between the hysterical voice on the recording and the quiet suburban reality, they all knew the reality of Sam in his garden, was jarring and undeniable. They had seen my son. They knew my family. The lies were suddenly physically audible. I saw Carol's face drain of all color, her mask of martyrdom cracking into one of pure shock. I stopped the recording. There was no violence. There were no black eyes. There was no demonic language. There was only my son in his garden with his father. This was a false report, an act known in law enforcement as swatting. It is a felony. And as the 911 Crisis Dispatch Supervisor, who personally took control of this call to stop a SWAT team from descending on my home and potentially killing my child, I can assure you it is being prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. A wave of gasps and shocked whispers rippled through the crowd. Carol's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection. This is outrageous. My client is the victim here. This is a violation of her—" "Sit down," I said, my voice dropping to a low, cold command that silenced him instantly. The authority I used every day on the job was now fully present. "I'm not finished." I let the weight of the felony charge sink in before I continued, my gaze locked on Carol. "But I know you are all asking the same question I was. Why? Why would anyone do something so extreme, so dangerous, so hateful?" I looked directly at Carol, whose eyes were now wide with a new kind of terror, the terror of being truly, completely seen. "Because this was never about my son," I said, my voice softening slightly, which only made it more damning. This was about hers. I clicked to the next file. The first image that flashed onto the projector screen was a sunny school picture of a boy with sandy hair. Daniel. "This was Daniel Gable," I said softly. I then told them the story. The real story. I spoke of a boy diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome 10 years ago, of parents who rejected medicine in favor of exorcism. I put up the newspaper clippings. I described the court battle where they lost custody. Carol's allies started shouting. Lies, slander. This is inadmissible. But I wasn't in a courtroom. I was in the court of public opinion, surrounded by the very community Carol had tried to manipulate. Then I displayed the final images. The photos I took from her scrapbook. The charcoal drawings of the boy tied to the chair. The sketch of the boy being held down in the bathtub. Carol's campaign against my family was never about protecting this community. I said, my voice filling the horrified silence. It was a desperate, twisted attempt to heal her own wounded past. She projected her own tragedy onto my son. She looked at his harmless stimming and saw the demon she failed to conquer in her own child. I looked back at Carol. She was a statue broken. She tried to cleanse my son, to vindicate the catastrophic choices that led to her losing her own. She put my son's life and the lives of the responding officers in grave danger, not out of faith, but out of a deep and profound personal failure. The 911 call wasn't just a lie. It was a rehearsal for a past she can't escape and attempt to rewrite history with my son as the victim. I looked around the room at the faces of my neighbors. The confusion was gone, replaced by a universal look of horror, pity, and dawning, sickening comprehension. They were not just looking at a difficult neighbor anymore. They were looking at a broken, dangerous woman who had tried to sacrifice my son to her own ghosts. The case against her was no longer just legal, it was moral. And in that room, she had been judged and found wanting by the very community she claimed to be protecting. The fallout was immediate and absolute. Carol and her entourage were escorted from the clubhouse in disgrace. The HOA board, in a unanimous and hastily called vote, permanently banned her from all community property and initiated proceedings to have her fined for gross misconduct and endangerment. The criminal case, bolstered by the irrefutable 911 recording and the evidence of motive I had uncovered, proceeded swiftly. Faced with a mountain of evidence and a long prison sentence, Carol pled guilty to felony abuse of emergency services and filing a false police report. The judge, citing the malicious and premeditated targeting of a disabled child and the extreme danger she had created, sentenced her to a term in a state correctional facility to be followed by years of mandatory psychiatric treatment. My illegal entry into her home was never mentioned. The DA considered the evidence I provided a tip from a confidential informant, corroborated by a subsequent legal search. The Oak Haven community was shaken out of its quiet suburban complacency. Shame, it turned out, was a powerful motivator. The HOA issued a formal public apology to my family. They worked with us to draft a new good neighbor clause for the bylaws, one that explicitly protected residents from harassment based on disability, religion, or any other personal difference. The prayer circles vanished overnight. In their place, small tentative gestures of kindness began to appear. A neighbor I'd never spoken to dropped off a rare Japanese tomato plant for Sam's garden. Another left a book on entomology on our porch. People who had once averted their eyes now met ours with warm smiles and genuine greetings. They were learning finally to see Sam not as a source of unease, but as a cherished part of the neighborhood's fabric. Months later, on a warm Saturday afternoon, I was in the garden with Sam. The air was peaceful, filled with the industrious hum of bees and the low, contented hum of my son as he carefully staked his towering fruit-laden tomato vines. The chaos of the dispatch center, the memory of Carol's voice, the flashing red light on my console. It had all begun to fade, replaced by the simple, profound, and unassailable peace of this moment. Ben came out of the house with a tray, carrying 3 tall glasses of lemonade. He squeezed my shoulder, and we stood together for a moment, just watching our son. Sam paused his work, his focus shifting. He looked up at a monarch butterfly, fluttering past its orange wings, like stained glass in the sunlight. And for the first time in a very long time, his hum was joined by a quiet, unrestrained, and joyful laugh. The storm had passed. We had faced down a darkness born of profound pain and terrifying delusion. We had won, not by meeting hysteria with more hysteria, but with calm, unyielding, and devastating truth. I had used the very system Carol tried to corrupt to protect the one thing in the universe that mattered most. The result was more than just justice. It was peace. It was the sound of my son safe and happy in his own backyard, free to be exactly who he was. And that was a victory more profound, more complete than any I had ever known.